Welcome to the SGV Master Key, a show where you will hear personal stories of triumph over failures and how others successfully navigated the unique landscape that is the San Gabriel Valley. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we have chosen the San Gabriel Valley for our home or businesses or both. We believe it is the people and small businesses that make this community great, and we love to share their stories with you. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at sgvmasterkey.com. Here are the hosts for the show, Russell Mono and Scott Wormuth.
All right. Thanks for joining us again for another episode of the SGV Master Key.
Well, Russell, a few days late, but happy Veterans Day. I know you've served domestically and overseas, and I hope you had a meaningful day.
I did. Thank you. You know, it has a different meaning, I think, now that I'm out and reflecting on my time in and the people who have served. I made a post on social media really reflecting on the sacrifice that veterans make specifically to be away from their family and loved ones. I think that's one of the hardest things about serving.
Yeah, I would think it's very significant. And it happens to tie in with our guest today, Chen, who not only is also a veteran, but has really sacrificed, you know, being with his family and his two young children, even very recently. So I think, you know, let's introduce Chen, who is our guest today, a person who holds many, you know, titles, and we'll work our way through. But first of all, you know, to you also, happy Veterans Day.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Russell. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So we mentioned that you had served, and you very recently were overseas for a year, I believe. What is your area of service, and what were you doing?
So I am an intelligence officer in the United States Navy, Lieutenant Commander. I recently pinned on Lieutenant Commander, and I've been in for about 10 years. And this was my first mobilization overseas. I was tagged for mobilization, and I was supporting Operation Inherent Resolve, which is the coalition to defeat the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. So I was based at the headquarters in Kuwait, leading an intelligence team, and yeah, just supporting the overall effort.
And you were gone about a year?
Yeah, when you factor in the training, so there is a large mobilization period where you're getting trained up, where you're taught the battlefield tactics. Even if you aren't going to use them, you're in a battlefield environment, so you have to learn those things. So troop movements, things like that, life-saving techniques. You get trained up with a pistol, with a rifle, and you get qualified for that. And you have to get qualified. If you don't get qualified, you can't go over. And that all took about a month and a half. And there was also intel school. And then I was there boots on ground for about 270 days. And then coming back, there was a period of demobilization. But COVID really threw a wrench into everything. So everything kind of got pushed back and delayed. And there was really uncertainty whether or not I would be able to come home as scheduled. And for a lot of people, they were actually delayed.
Well, yeah, the return date is sort of, as I understand it, like everybody's looking forward to that, right? There's always a countdown, whether it's, you know, 3 months out or 3 weeks out. You always have that date in mind when you're going to see your family again. And that must have been really tough to be away from them for so long.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone knows, you know, the date that they're scheduled for, and if things happen that push it back, it really impacts morale, because you're looking forward to getting back. You want to do the mission, but you also, you know, want to complete the mission at home, which is to be a father or a husband or a wife or, you know, a mother. You want to continue that as well. But I'd say, yeah, I'm fortunate to have gone at this period of time where we do have internet. We've got FaceTime, we've got video calling, and I can't imagine what it's like for people who deployed even 10 years ago, you know, where they didn't have internet that was that strong, and they couldn't stay in touch as well. So I'm fortunate.
So I mentioned family. What does your family consist of here?
So my wife, Karen, I met her in Diamond Bar on the 4th of July, and we have I'd say our first offspring would be our dog Mozart, and he's a rat terrier. And then we have 2 boys, Lincoln and Carver, 6 years old and 4 years old.
Wow. What was that like to be away from them during that time in their life?
It was really hard. And I think the impact was, it was more obvious when I came home, and I felt like, my oldest son, Lincoln, he's now starting first grade. Well, yeah, he just started first grade. So he was in kindergarten before. I could tell that his math was not at the level that it should have been. And that, if you don't have a parent at home who's able to help guide the kids, especially with distance learning right now, I mean, so much of the learning has to take place at home. You really need parents who are engaged. And my wife, bless her heart, I mean, she's amazing, but she's taking care of 2 kids. She's running my real estate business. She's doing all this in a pandemic where normally you would have help, but now everyone's socially distanced, so they can't even come and help you, even if they wanted to. So for her to do what she did was incredible. But you can tell that for kids doing distance learning, you need that extra support to help guide them along. And I could tell that my son, was behind in certain subjects. And for me, I felt, really, really bad about that. But, now is the time to catch up. So there's always that opportunity.
Can we kind of set the stage a bit? How would you describe yourself in terms of who you are, what you do in the community, in your job, etc.? Mm-hmm. I know you've got numerous titles and positions, but
sure,
why don't you let us know what it is?
So I would say I'm definitely a native of the San Gabriel Valley. I was born in Michigan and spent time in the Midwest, lived in Singapore, but my formative years from 5th grade on have been in Hacienda Heights. And I went to Hacienda La Puente Unified School District, public schools, and then went on to college in the East Coast, worked for a bit in management consulting, and then did some travels here and there. I love to travel. But when I came back to Hacienda Heights, and I always had the idea of coming back and serving the community, even when I was in high school. And I'll say it had to do with being very involved in local political campaigns. And I saw the impact that a good school board member could have. You could really have an impact on different students' lives. You can kind of pick out students and say, hey, I think you can do more. I think you can do this and that. And, I felt like that happened. I saw it happen, and it helped me. And I wanted to be that school board member that could come back and help give kids more opportunities. And so in 2007, I ran for school board for Hacienda La Puente Unified, and I got elected. And then I was serving the same school district that I graduated from, which was fantastic. So, that was my intro into politics. I served on the school board for 2 terms, and then I ran for Mount San Antonio College Board of Trustees, and I just got reelected to that. So, I've been serving in that capacity. I became really involved with the Democratic Party as well. After I ran for school board, that's when I was exposed to the broader political environment, where in 2007 I was running, I got elected. And then, as you know, back then, a little known senator, Barack Obama, was running for president, and no one really expected that he was going to win. Everyone thought it was going to be Hillary Clinton. And so his team was making the effort to reach out to local elected officials to seek endorsements. And that's not something that Hillary Clinton needed to do at all. But, his team reached out, and I thought, yeah, I read up on him. He's great. I, endorsed him, became a pledged delegate, and then just entered this entirely new world of politics. So I've been really involved in Democratic politics since then, and was a candidate for Congress actually a couple of times as well. So that's my political side. Something else that I think defines me is definitely being in the military. I went to Harvard with a Naval ROTC scholarship, and I was in ROTC for a year, and that's your trial period. But I decided, you know what, I just want to be a regular student, because you're getting up at 5 a.m. I was getting up at 5 a.m. I was Marine Corps option. So I'd get up at 5 to go running at Boston University, twice a week, and then getting up at 5 to go to MIT to take naval science courses. And as a college student, you're just not geared to wake up that early. You just want to hang out and have fun. So, but afterwards, I found an opportunity to do a direct commission into the reserves, and I actually found out about that through Eric Garcetti, the mayor of Los Angeles. He was a council member at the time. So I found out that it was something he was doing, and I reached out to him. He connected me with his captain at the time, and that got the ball rolling, and I got the commission, and yeah, now it's become a really big part of my life. And then the third component would be business. You know, I'm in the real estate business. I manage properties, residential and commercial, in the San Gabriel Valley and in Los Angeles.
So what was the drive to enter into the military? Like what sparked your interest there?
So I think, you know, when I was in high school, I had mentioned to my father that, hey, this other student who was a top student at our school had gotten an NROTC scholarship, a Marine Corps scholarship. And I just kind of mentioned it to him offhand. He said, hey, you should try for that. I was like, really? And, you know, I was already accepted. I did early action and, you know, to Harvard. I was already in, you know, everything was set to go. But he said, yeah, I think you should do it. And I gave it some thought. And I thought, oh, okay. I mean, as a young man, you're somewhat, I mean, there's always this attraction to the military, to, you know, guns and things like that. I played video games. I enjoyed that. But the idea also of serving and this recognition that not a lot of Asian Americans, you know, well, the perception is not a lot of Asian Americans go into the military, although the most highly decorated military unit in U.S. history was the Japanese American 442nd. And yet there's still this perception that sometimes Asian Americans are not American enough. And knowing that, you know, I had an opportunity to change that perception. That's why I had that initial thought to participate. And that's why I decided when there was an opportunity to join the reserves that I would enter. Also just, yeah, being a part of, as someone who has run for Congress, who wants to help make decisions at the federal level, knowing how the largest swath of our tax dollars is being spent, I think is really important. You know, we spend so much money. The Department of Defense discretionary budget is such a large portion of where we put our tax dollars. And it has such a huge impact, not just on what we can spend domestically, but what happens around the world. And I think everyone should know, you know, how that's being spent and have an impact. And, you know, mandatory service, not necessarily in uniform, I think is actually a really good thing. You know, Taiwan has it, Israel has it. You know, any kind of service that brings you together with people you wouldn't normally interact with, I think is positive. And I think in our country right now, people get stratified so quickly. You know, once you go into high school, you get put in an honors track, an AP track, or maybe a college prep track. And then there are students that you never really interact with outside of being, you know, at the lunch table. And even then that's segregated. And then you go on to your different jobs and your different roles. But what I love about the military and what I really saw was you have people from all walks of life, different backgrounds that you normally wouldn't interact with. And you have this one mission to work together, and you set aside your differences. And there are people from, you know, the South that, you know, I normally would never have a chance to interact with, that I was working with side by side. And I think that's a really positive experience when you're forced to work with people that you think you're really different from, but you then realize with a shared mission, you can really work together.
Do you see that in any other area of life? I mean, is the military more like this than anything else? You know, do you see it in, say, domestic service opportunities, AmeriCorps, or these types of things? Yeah, AmeriCorps. Or,
you know, I think the possibility is there, but even AmeriCorps, if you take a look at who joins, it's a lot of the students who end up joining are students from very, you know, quote unquote elite colleges, right? It draws from, you know, the Harvard, Stanfords, et cetera. And so the thing about the military is you are, I mean, here's the other thing about the military. It's really interesting, right? Everyone, in our society, you know, there's a lot of attacks on socialism. And it was one of the things that was really leveled against the Democrats. When you take a look at the military, it is actually a very socialist institution where you're told when to wake up, you're told what to eat, you're told what to wear, your healthcare is taken care of, you know, the government runs everything. And so, you know, in a way, it's the most socialist institution out there, and you really have no rights. But in that environment, you are forced to interact with people that you normally wouldn't. And I feel like in volunteer organizations where you don't have that authority, because in the military, the authority is absolute. You got a chain of command. You know, what they say goes. In any other environment, you have the ability to, you know, say, no, I don't want to hang out with this person. I don't want to work with that person. In the military, you don't have that. And in a way, I think there are some benefits where you're within that tight structure.
Well, that's a unique perspective. Yeah, I never thought of it like that. I did meet people in the military, Caucasian and African American, who had grown up and had never seen in person a Caucasian or an African American in their life.
Really?
And that's, coming from Los Angeles, it's, unheard of, right? Mm-hmm. But they literally have never seen, and, that goes without saying, they've never seen an Asian outside of a movie. And so it's hard to believe that people in this country live like that, but there are people like that.
Do you think there should be a draft? You mentioned Taiwan and Israel having required service.
I think a draft would never go over in our country. I think we have to push for more of a service mindset. But I do think that and here's the corollary to that. If more people were serving, because as much as I say, the military is diverse, there's also the fact that, especially from the enlisted ranks, we are drawing from the socioeconomic sides of society that are a little less well off. There is a concerted effort. If you take a look at the enlisted side, more minorities, African Americans, Latinos. On the officer side, you're going to see more Caucasians. So there is that disparity. And if you encourage more people to be a part of the military, you can start to spread that burden across the entire country. And especially, it will touch upon more leaders who are making decisions about whether or not we should go to war. Right now, only 1% of the population is involved in the military. And if you take a look at that, U.S. Congress and Senate, very few people have any ties to the military. And so it's very easy for them to say, well, we think that we should go to war. Right? Because it doesn't really impact them. But when you have a cousin or a brother or a son or daughter that will be in the line of fire, I think that'll make you think twice about whether or not that's necessary or the right path. So, a draft, if we were ever in World War III and it was necessary, then I think, Congress is going to do what it has to do. But at this point, I don't think we have to institute something that makes it mandatory.
But it's the whole mindset, the whole trying to develop this feeling of service to your country. Mm-hmm. It's very effective. It's been effective for you being in the military, and you had that desire to serve. But do you see that that's a problem in our society today? This element of maybe not having the desire to serve the country?
I think it's there aren't a lot of avenues for that to take place. Even with AmeriCorps, it's something that people who are relatively privileged, they get to do. Peace Corps, it's not an opportunity that anyone can take part of, right? And so when we did have the military and we did have that service where it was mandatory, everyone participated in it. But now I feel like we're in this kind of rat race where you graduate from high school and maybe just go straight to a job, or you graduate from college and you're going straight to a job. And there are very few opportunities to add service to your life. Some ways would be becoming a reserve deputy sheriff, right? That's one opportunity. You could become, pick up an EMT certification, pick up some kind of skills on the side. But in general, there really aren't ways for us in our busy lives to fit that in. Now, being in the reserves is one way. Reserve military service, I think, is probably one of the best ways to incorporate that into your life, because, employers have to respect it if you are called to duty. It's already kind of out there. It's a system that exists, but I don't think there are a lot of other systems. But then again, you do have things like Kiwanis, Lions Club, etc. So there are groups like that are out there as well. But I think that our society could use more of those options.
We were talking briefly about the impact or the treatment of veterans in this country, and how mental health issues, PTSD, coverage, help for veterans. It's sometimes sad to see that, that these guys have gone off, and that's of course on mostly the enlisted side, but it seems like those stories are increasing a lot.
Well, you look at the Second World War, everybody was a hero. That was a different situation. You know, now, as you pointed out, many people don't have any connection to the military. But Second World War, everybody had an uncle or a brother or a father or a sister or a friend of some sort that was serving. And today, it may be very rare to you know, that you know somebody who is serving or is active. So I think a military member is looked at differently today. And how do you feel? I mean, you are you considered active or reserve military?
During the deployment, I was active, and then I was honorably discharged into the reserves. So now I'm in the reserves.
Okay. You probably get treated very well, right?
There were a lot of discounts on Veterans Day, a lot of free meals.
Right. Yeah. But it's sort of like there's a dichotomy, you know, like a lot of veterans are homeless on the streets, sick, not getting attention. But then we give a lot of lip service to, you know, how great our veterans are, and thank you for our service and this, or for your service and this type of thing. But look how we're actually treating our veterans.
Yeah. A lot of them do slip through the cracks. And, you know, I feel like the Veterans Administration, it tries hard. Now that I'm officially a veteran, you know, I get the emails, I get the communications asking me to sign up for VA healthcare and to get my checkup. So I know they're trying, but it's still such a huge sprawling organization that people can get lost, and there's still just a lot of paperwork that you have to fill out. So I can see how people can slip through the cracks. And I also think, you know, when we have these prolonged wars, it's really different from before. So the Afghanistan war that we've been in, it's the longest war that we've ever been involved in history. And, you know, Iraq, our involvement there is like the second longest. And yet you wouldn't really know that based on how everyone goes about their daily lives, that we're still wrapped up in these conflicts that have gone on forever. And that has maybe not a physical toll, but it has a mental toll on service members. Because before you would go into you know, there was a war, but it would last maybe 2-3 years. It would be intense. It would be difficult. But afterwards, you're out, and the entire country is kind of aware of it. Everyone's involved. But now people are just rotating in and out of the Middle East, and, you know, we're not really making, you know, that much progress, and we're still there. So I think that has a mental toll as well.
Sure. So for our listeners, Jay, my picture of a naval intel officer comes mostly from like G.I. Jane. But what are you able to share with our audience about what that entails? What does that job do?
So, you know, intel is, where I was working was in a SCIF, secure, compartmentalized facility. And, you know, no cell phones, nothing like that. A lot of our work is in front of computers these days. And, you know, you're providing actionable intelligence to the ones who are actually kicking down doors and things like that, right? So there's different roles for everybody, but we're basically taking, I guess, raw information and taking it and turning it into something that we can really use, and that's when it becomes intelligence.
In real time? What's the delay?
In real time.
In real time. Wow.
Oh yeah. I mean, it depends what your focus is on intel, but yeah, the turnaround's very quick, and we're always getting requests from the generals, you know, something that they think of, something they see on the battlefield that needs to be looked into. And that's why, you know, a lot of people were asking me, hey, Jay, you're in front of a computer. You could do that from Los Angeles. You know, why are you over there? But, you know, you got to be in the same time zone. You need to be able to give briefings. And so the generals are over there, and therefore they need the team there that can respond quickly to any types of requests that they may have.
You were in Kuwait the whole time?
I was in Kuwait the whole time. Yeah.
And how's that? What's life like in Kuwait, living there?
Yeah.
What kind of experiences?
I think I was fortunate. The base that I was on was one of the largest ones. And so we had more creature comforts than a lot of other bases. There were a couple of Starbucks there. There were some restaurants on post. There was a Argentinian restaurant, steakhouse, that I just loved, and a pizza restaurant that I would even go to if it was here.
This is all on base.
This is on a base.
Wow.
Yeah. But, I was fortunate. Then you have those bases that are further out where you really have nothing. So our base was relatively comfortable. But yeah, we still couldn't, go outside the wire. You couldn't leave the base whenever you wanted. You would have to go with a buddy. And this was when there was no COVID. When COVID hit, everything shut down. Then we lost all the creature comforts. Our DFACs for a period of time were cutting down on the food because we weren't getting our supplies in. And one thing that I realized is that for us, it is incredible that the United States maintains so many bases around the world. Nobody else is doing it. And I can see why. It is such an expensive endeavor to basically create a small city in the middle of a desert and to sustain it for decades. And that's what we do. And China is only now starting to create outposts, naval outposts. They have one, off of Africa, and, they're slowly dipping into that. But no one else is doing it because it is prohibitively expensive. And you see the entire, what they call the military industrial complex that kind of surrounds all of our operations. Like you know about the troops that we have in the Middle East. What you don't hear about are the contractors that are there to provide additional support. The contractors that have taken on a lot of the roles that the military used to do, but now we contract out. And I'm not just talking about the roles that the green suiters would do, and they call them green suiters because we're the ones wearing the green uniforms. But even just janitorial services, right? Like cleaning the bathrooms, things like that. You watch all those old movies and you see that, that recruit, scrubbing the floor with a toothbrush. When you're on those bases, that doesn't happen. We have contractors that are doing all that work. Now, the interesting thing was when COVID hit, we lost all of our contractors. So a lot of these contractors live in parts of Kuwait that are basically thought of as, slums, like densely packed. Now, the interesting thing about Kuwait is there are more third country nationals than there are Kuwaitis in Kuwait. All of the work, the manual labor is done by people from the Philippines, Bangladesh, Egypt, etc. And they all live in, relatively cramped quarters. So when COVID hit, it spread like wildfire. But the Kuwaiti government was very quick to have a quarantine, and they just blocked off. They put a chain link fence around all these neighborhoods, and nobody could get out. And then some of our contractors, some members of my team were there as well. And so we lost a lot of people, but that forced the military to have to tighten its belt and start doing things that normally it wouldn't do, but maybe it had done in the past. And we could do it. The mission went forward. I was able to fulfill the mission. The soldiers were then cleaning the bathrooms. They're doing all these things that the contractors were doing, but things moved forward. And I think in a way it was a good lesson. Without a pandemic like COVID to force the military to cut back, there's no natural desire to do so. So hopefully, I'm hoping that from that pandemic, we're learning about what the military really needs, going forward.
You said that was your first deployment with the Navy?
That was my first, active duty mobilization. I've done shorter tours, supporting much shorter exercises. Yeah.
And earlier you mentioned a real estate company. Yeah. So that's another hat that you wear. You want to share with us about that?
Yeah. So not as interesting, but I am in real estate. So that's my day job. It pays the bills, but I manage and I do a little bit of investing myself in real estate. Yeah.
Okay. And would you say that the main role that you have right now while you're here and not deployed is with Mount SAC?
Yes. So Mount SAC right now, so if viewers aren't aware, Mount SAC is the largest single campus community college in California. And I would say it's the best community college in America. It's really a fantastic school. It's located in Walnut, and I'm on the Board of Trustees. It's a 7-member board, and we basically help set the direction for the college. And right now we're overseeing a $700 million bond that was passed by the voters 2 years ago to rebuild and upgrade our facilities, because some of Mount SAC's facilities, actually Mount SAC started off as, I believe, a naval hospital training center. So some of the buildings that were there from the 40s and 50s were, built by the military to help train and
they need some updating, I bet.
Yeah, not exactly compliant with today's standards. Right. So we're upgrading that.
Wow. Nice. You brought this wonderful painting with you today. Yeah.
Yes.
Can you share with us what that's about?
So this was an object that has a lot of meaning to me, and it actually relates to this area as well, and to real estate. So I mentioned that I was in real estate. My family's been involved in real estate for a little bit of time, and one of the first buildings that my family looked at that they were going to purchase, because they were in retail and they wanted to, instead of rent, they wanted to own their own building. It was actually in Pasadena, just down the street, and it was an antique store. And my mother was negotiating with the owners without a broker for a period of time, and they owned an antique store. They brought me to the store one day, and then I saw this painting, and at the time we were reading Farewell to Manzanar, and I couldn't read the writing. It's in Japanese, but I looked at it and I thought, that is, the way the book explained the environment, that's exactly what it looked like. And so I asked the owner about it, and he said, yeah, it's a painting. I'm not really sure what it is, but since you're the only one who's ever asked about it, here, you can have it. So he gave it to me. And that was like in the mid 90s, and did some more research and found out that it was actually a painting of the dojo house at Manzanar, painted by someone who was there at the time. So I think it's meaningful because, number one, it was given to me in Pasadena, where I've spent a lot of time. Number two, just the whole Japanese American experience, I don't think is recognized enough. One of my favorite places, didn't make my top 3, but it's up there, is the Santa Anita Mall. And a lot of people don't realize that the Santa Anita racetrack was a staging ground for Japanese Americans who were going to be shipped off to the desert.
Right.
And we have a lot of these kind of monuments to inequality in California, which we're not that familiar with, but they're around. And so, I have this in my house, and it's something that I want my kids to be aware of, that as wonderful as a nation we are, there's always the possibility that we can slip backwards and do things that, down the line you'd think are impossible to do. But hey, not too long ago, we incarcerated hundreds of thousands of Japanese Americans, over 100,000 Japanese Americans for no crime at all. And that's something that we have to know, that we have to, be vigilant against.
Are you able to hold that up so we can get a shot of that? I want to describe it to the listener. It's a painting of, I guess the dojo house is in the center, and it's out in Manzanar, which is flat desert-like, right? In the background, you see the snow on the mountains, and over to the left and right, you see I guess they're sort of like barracks or buildings, right? For the Japanese that were housed there. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that in. That's really neat.
I'm curious, as an Asian American yourself, do you have a fear that this kind of thinking is returning? Or do you feel that it's a prominent problem in society today?
So I'll say that to go back to that, where you would have mass incarcerations, I don't think we're at that level. And I think it's because we are more aware, because we have social media. When terrible things happen, we know about it immediately, and we have easy access to cell phones, and it's just harder to get away with certain things like that, because it's so easy to put it right in front of your face and say, hey, is this okay? And that's one of the reasons why I think, George Floyd and his murder kicked off such a movement. It's finally, we're seeing this in your face. But I will say that in the last, 4 years, we have moved more in that direction. Just with the rhetoric, when the coronavirus hit, the anti-Asian sentiment definitely rose. You would see an uptick in violence against Asian Americans, and against the rhetoric that's been used against other members of the community, against Mexicans, Muslims, etc. It's taken a turn for the worse. And you always hope that America's moving forward and getting better and better, but we've seen how easily we can take steps backwards with the wrong leader. It all starts from the top. When someone at the top is making statements and telling you that it's okay and basically validating your worst instincts, then people are going to act on that. And that's what we've seen. So
that starts at the top, but wouldn't you agree that the most effective action is community-based, more local? Mm-hmm. I mean, a person would have more a tangible feeling that they're making some difference at a local level. It's harder to have that, involvement on a big level,
Yeah. So that's why I think it's really important. It's all local. I think one of the problems we have is social media has allowed us to operate in silos. We're glued to our screens. But if you were to actually, and now we can't because of coronavirus, talk to people face to face who were actually, political viewpoints were different from yours, you'd realize they're not terrible people. They just have different ideas. And at the end of the day, we all want what's best for the country, but we may have different views on how to get there. But I feel like a lot of that's been lost because social media allows us to just sit in silos and not hear that other view and allow the most extreme, attacks to filter through to us. So definitely, I think at the local level, that's where we can get rid of these types of prejudices. But this past year, I think it's because of the pandemic and everything else that's happening. It's been just a confluence of events that have made it more difficult.
To sort of go back to what you were asking about being Asian American and do you have any sort of fear, right? My friend is very vocal to the Asian American community in that he describes the Asian Americans now as being very comfortable, as being like the model minority and very close with, let's say, the majority, like Caucasian. And when issues are happening with, let's say, Black or Latino, that it's separate. And so he's always advocating that what's possible with one ethnic group is possible for you. And he really tries to draw attention to that a lot. I never thought of it that way, but I can see where especially in San Gabriel Valley, right? Like you feel like a majority here, really, right? You don't feel that difference, but to not speak up when there's some sort of injustice to one, just because you feel comfortable, like this is a big reminder, right? That this country did some pretty bad things.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. And to remember that the rights that Asian Americans have, just the fact that there are as many as there are right now is because of the Naturalization Act of 1965. Before, the defining laws were the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, which stopped the Chinese from coming over. The 1907 Japanese Agreement, with Japan, which basically said no more Japanese were to come over. But if it wasn't for the civil rights movements that were primarily pushed forward by the African American community, we wouldn't have these other laws that would take place that would allow the Asian American community to come here and to flourish. So I think your friend's right that we should not think that we live in a vacuum, that our achievements came by ourselves, and that we don't need to look at the travails of others and not be sympathetic to them, because we owe it to a lot of other groups, and what happens to them absolutely could happen to us as well.
So you're born here in America. You grew up in Hacienda, went to Harvard, came back. Do you consider yourself Chinese, American? Like, how do you refer to yourself in that light?
Yeah. So my parents are from Taiwan, and my wife, she will always call herself Taiwanese American. I consider myself Taiwanese American. But I'll tell you, if somebody calls me Chinese American, I'm not offended, because I do have direct ancestors that are from China as well. And I think it touches on something really interesting, which is, just in our community, right? You have people who are from China and people who are from Taiwan, and people have often talked about Taiwanese politics. When you're running for office, I've been asked, oh, well, are you blue or are you green? Referring to Taiwanese politics. I'm like, I really don't care about that. I'm red, white, and blue. Those are the colors that matter. But we do have some folks who still care more about the politics of the homeland versus what impacts them right here, right now, and is going to impact their children. And that is something that I feel we as a community have to kind of overcome, is to care more about, and even in this election, I'll tell you, there were people who said, oh, well, I'm going to support Trump because I think he's going to be tougher on China and better for Taiwan. Irrespective of everything else that he's done to stoke anti-Asian sentiment. And, my message is, look, personally, I don't think Trump can find Taiwan on a map. You know, he's going to do what he's going to do to poke, you know, China in the eye. But at the end of the day, you got to think about what's best for our country and not what's best for, you know, another country or what you think may be best.
I remember going through a period where I didn't know what I would refer to myself as. I mean, I look in the mirror and my children, and maybe for a few generations, will always look Asian, even if they're 100%, you know, born in America. And I struggled with that a bit. And I said, well, I'm not really Japanese because I don't have all that culture. I mean, I've met people from Japan and I'm like, I'm definitely not like that. And when I think about how I grew up and all the traditions and all the culture that I have, I'm American. I would say that I'm American. But when you look at me, people know that I'm not.
Well, that's the difference, because me too, right? I mean, these same issues you're going through, I go through. It doesn't matter if my skin is white and, you know, am I German? Am I, you know, Swedish? Am I, you know, and how much of that is part of my life? Well, actually, probably none of it is part of my life. But the difference is, like you just said, if you look in the mirror, you have an Asian face, and somebody might think you're, you know, just, you know, yesterday from Japan, right?
Right.
I mean, it's a big difference, you know, how you're perceived, the perception, and that's something that you would deal with that someone like me doesn't have to deal with. But these issues of identity, we all deal with, don't we?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter your color.
Sure.
Yeah. It has different ramifications, but I think, you know, as you said, we should always, we should be proud of all the components that make up our identity. And, you know, yeah, the fact that I love the fact that I could go to Taiwan, and my parents, when I was growing up, spoke to me in Chinese. A lot of their peers at the time in the Midwest spoke to their children only in English because they were afraid that if they didn't speak English and they didn't learn English, they would never assimilate. My parents had a different mindset. And so Chinese was my first language. And as a result, you know, I can enjoy different cultures. So I'm currently raising my kids to speak Chinese. We speak Chinese to them. Well, we did primarily, but we also sent our two boys to Japanese school. So they go to Iruka, which is a Japanese preschool just around the corner, because we just feel like, you know, if they can be exposed to Japanese culture and be able to one day go to Japan and speak the language, how wonderful is that? And this is one of the few countries where you could actually do that, where you could expose your children to so many different cultures. And we should be proud of the fact that we have so many cultures that make up America. And we should constantly be, you know, searching, like you should, part German, part Swedish. I mean, that's amazing. I had a chance to go to Europe and experience, right, you know, Germany and Sweden, those two countries. And it's amazing. Like that is something we should always be proud of.
And we should always be teaching our children foreign languages, foreign cultures, foreign ideas and thoughts for their own benefit, so that they're, you know, widely exposed to a variety of people. My own children, you know, are half Chinese, and I always felt bad, you know, because our mother-in-law lived with us, or my mother-in-law lived with us, and I would always say, why do you not speak Chinese to them? You should be speaking Chinese. Mm-hmm. And she says, well, but they wouldn't understand it if I did. But they wouldn't understand English if you spoke it to them, if they had never spoken in English before. I mean, you need to learn the language, you know. And yeah, I just think it's important that we, you know, share our roots and
right,
and other countries as well. In other words, you're sending your kids to Japanese school, so you know that's just more exposure. It will benefit them more as they grow up.
Children, they soak it up so quickly.
And they'll soak it up right now. Yeah.
I mean, we threw them in there. They knew nothing. And they cried the first couple of days, but now they speak Japanese.
Right.
Yeah.
One of my fears is that this generation or future generations, they feel like they're being exposed to so much, just, you know, having it at their fingertips, but there's nothing to replace traveling and going to a different part of the country or being immersed in another country, it just gives you a broader perspective on things. And you can't replace that with, video and YouTube and Instagram. You just can't.
Yeah.
Even though they're getting exposure to all those different cultures and whatnot. But yeah, I want to go more into what are you doing now? What are your plans for the future? But let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
The legal process can be intimidating. You don't know where to start and you're unsure of what to expect. The attorneys and staff at the law offices of Scott Warmoth have been serving the San Gabriel Valley for over 35 years, helping people just like you navigate through the legal process and ensuring you're treated fairly. You can find them at law888.com or call 626-282-6868. That's 626-282-6868.
All right, we're back with Jay Chen. So, Jay, what exciting things, or what are you up to now? What's in the future for you?
Well, I just won my reelection to Mount SAC, and I'm looking forward to continuing my work there. I just came back from my deployment, so looking forward to just spending some time with the family. But what I'm also looking forward to is, I'm very involved in politics. And in 2021, there's going to be a redrawing of the district lines. And in 2022, we're going to have, new district lines. So I've run for office before. I've lost different offices, but I've always had this commitment to serve. So, I'm very interested to see what shakes out in 2021 and 2022 in terms of, how the political lines are going to be redrawn. And also just this opportunity to help support the Biden administration in whatever capacity, that's possible. Even as an officer in the Navy, having him as my commander in chief, I think it's going to feel different. And I'm looking forward to seeing how he directs the military, what his goals are.
So you mentioned spending time with your family is one of the things now that you're back. What does a family of four do now in COVID?
Yeah, it's tough, but you had talked earlier about travel, and travel is something that I really, really love. I've been to many countries in Central America, every country in Central America. I lived a year in China, spent a year in Costa Rica. I've always wanted to impart that love of travel to my kids. So before I deployed, we took the kids to Guadalajara, and we've taken them to Puebla, to, some of the cities you don't initially think about when you're thinking about Mexico, just to expose them to that. It's harder now with COVID, but what we're trying to do is just do road trips in California. So we're just going to take for Thanksgiving, a trip up the Central Coast to Morro Bay, and hopefully they'll experience their first time camping, car camping, and experience the beauty of California. We're so fortunate to be in this state. There's so much to see.
You might run into Russell fishing up there.
Yeah, I was just there last weekend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Morro Bay. I went up a little further than that to Cayucas.
Yes, Cayucas.
Yeah. So Morro Bay, Cayucas, Avila, and Santa Barbara. Yeah, so I went up before that coast drive up to Monterey, Carmel, Big Sur, all that. Mm-hmm. But driving on the one along the coast is tough. Like if you're just going leisurely, it's fine. If you don't have a time frame, but other than that, like it's tough. It's a tough drive. So you're gonna go there with your family. That sounds like a really nice trip.
Avila Beach is one of my favorite beach towns.
Really,
I just love it has one of the few like working seafood fishing piers.
Yes,
where they're actually bringing in seafood onto the pier, and you can drive up on the pier and park on the pier.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and they have a touristy pier as well.
Yes,
closer to the city, but the working pier is actually very interesting.
Have you been to Morro Bay before?
Yes, first time camping and only time camping with my wife was in Morro Bay, so this is going to be a repeat. It's hard to convince my wife to go camping, so she said, "I'll give you one night," and I said, "Okay," and we'll do it in Morro Bay, which we know is doable. You've done it before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you going to do any fishing?
I'm actually going to try to do some crabbing. I've got a crab net. Yeah.
So that's the whole reason I was just up there. So Morro Bay is a no crustacean take zone.
Oh, okay.
I learned that from a local. So in the bay, you cannot take crustacean, but outside you can.
Okay.
Yeah, so you'd have to go north of the jetty.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it because it's a breeding area?
I have no idea, but there weren't any. I'm assuming you're going for Dungeness, yeah?
I don't. Yeah, Dungeness are tough to get. Probably just rock crab.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the higher north you go, the better. And people have been getting limits, I think, from like Pescadero and then north. So
Okay.
Pescadero, Half Moon, San Francisco, and higher. So yeah, that's interesting. Well, fishing. I love fishing. Well, I could talk forever about fishing, but this show is about you and some of your favorite things. So let's find out a little bit about that.
All right, Jay. So the SGV3, we call it. What are some of your favorite places or experiences in the San Gabriel Valley?
Okay, so one I've touched on before, and that's Old Pasadena. I spent a lot of time here. I've spent a lot of time here. Lived here briefly as well in an apartment, just on Colorado Boulevard, and I've watched the growth. I remember when it was a kind of a dodgy place. And then the Business Improvement District really turned it around.
What era are you saying it was kind of dodgy?
Early 90s.
Yeah. Okay.
Early mid 90s.
That's when I first became familiar with it too.
Yeah.
And I noticed that you properly call it Old Pasadena.
Yeah, not old. It's not Old Town Pasadena. Old Pasadena.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to was that Pac-Man Arcade?
Oh yeah. On Raymond.
Yeah.
Was that?
I think it's.
Or is it an old one?
PCC.
Oh, okay. No, I'm not familiar.
That was a really sketchy place.
Yeah. But they've really, it's really developed. And I remember when Paseo, Colorado was being developed, everyone was like, oh no, all the business is going to go to Paseo. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then when the Americana on Brand was opened in Glendale, everyone was afraid that business would shift there. But you cannot engineer authenticity. And that's what Old Pasadena has, that Main Street feel.
Yeah. It's funny. We've done 14 shows now, and I'll bet you at least half of the guests have identified Old Pasadena as their favorite place or one of their favorite places.
Yeah.
And
I can see why.
yeah, it really is a special place. What else do you?
So the second one I would say, and it might be obvious, but I really love Mount SAC, and I would encourage people to see what Mount SAC has to offer. So we've got a farmer's market there on Saturdays. Well, we used to, but there's also things like a planetarium where you can have your kids' birthday parties, and they can have this, amazing show up on the ceiling. We've got telescopes, an observatory, and there's also a museum there with stuffed animals that were donated. I mean, like, these are animals that were hunted, big game animals that nobody really knows about. Wow. But we've got a room full of these big game animals donated by a benefactor that you can make an appointment to see. And we've got domesticated, we have goats, horses, we have farmland. So there's just all this that you don't really know that Mount SAC has that I think more people should take advantage of.
I used to walk that campus a lot. My daughter would go there for swim meets. There's a Olympic caliber swim pool there that they use for swim meets.
Speaking of which, we are now building a world-class aquatic center. That swimming pool that she used is going to be torn down, and we're going to build a brand new aquatics center with 2 pools, and it's going to be right next to our new football stadium, which eventually I'm pretty sure will host the Olympic trials for track and field. That's the level it's at.
Well, Mount SAC has a history with track and field, the relays, right?
Yeah, Scott, you're right. It's very famous. A lot of people know about the hills in Mount SAC that they got to run for the relays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about number 3?
So number 3, one of my favorite places, it's a restaurant, and it's called Yakiya. I don't know if you've been there, but it's in Hacienda Heights. And I love it. My wife really loves it because it's a very short drive away, and it's just really good Japanese food. Well, it's actually beef. It's a high-end restaurant that you don't expect to find here in the San Gabriel Valley. You'd expect to find it like, on the west side, and you'd pay probably 2 or 3 times as much. But out here, it's accessible. The quality you get is great. And
where is it?
It's on Colima and Azusa.
Okay.
It's in that plaza owned by, there's a Panda Express there, and I believe it's operated by the Panda Express people. But
and there's a Chinese grocery store in that.
168.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Oh, the restaurant itself is operated by Panda?
Yeah, it's a Japanese concept, and it's basically barbecue, but only beef. And they give you 7 or 8 different courses of different cuts of beef.
Oh.
Just beef, including like A5 Wagyu.
Wow.
And the service is great. The drinks are great. And it's a 3-minute drive from my house. So we just love it.
Oh, that's close to your office.
Yeah, very close. Yeah, we can go there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should. Look for Gigi. She's the manager. And she's great. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your stories with us and our listeners. Where can people get in touch with you, Jay, if they want to assist in your campaign or assist with what you're doing at the school? How can they reach out to you?
Sure. So if you want to email me, my email is trusteejaychen@gmail.com. So TRUSTEE, Jay Chen, my name, JAYCHEN @gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook too, facebook.com/jaychen. And I post pretty regularly there.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the SGV Master Key. You can find the full back catalog of the SGV Master Key at sgvmasterkey.com and wherever you get your podcasts. This show was produced and edited by Russell Mono and Victoria Allers of Kind Monster Productions. Thanks again for listening or watching. We'll see you again real soon in the next episode.
Nice mother. No, kind mother.